Well, good afternoon, and welcome to a very special day, a time to celebrate the life of Annie Deering. And on behalf of the family, let me welcome you and express their appreciation for you being here to share on this special day. And I think this is a really good time for us to be together for a couple different reasons. One, I think it's just good for us to be together to be able to celebrate a life well lived. And we're going to do that today. I think it's also good for us just to be together to be able to show the family our support and encouragement and just real love on them during this time. And so we're glad that you're here to help that happen. And I think it's also good for us just to be able to have a point in time where we sort of put a stake in the ground and we turn our face to the future and we look to what's ahead of us. And so today is a good day, and we appreciate that you are all here to share in it. And so as we get started, would you just join me in prayer and ask God's blessing upon our time. God, we are thankful for your grace and your mercy, for who you are and what you mean to us, and we thank you that you, the creator of the universe and the author and perfecter of our faith, has called us together today to celebrate the life of a woman of great faith, Annie Deering. Father, we just want to take these few minutes to reflect on who she is and what she's meant to us and what was most important to her. And Lord, as we do, we just pray your presence upon us. Be with the family, that they might feel the love, that they might feel your presence. God, most of all, we thank you for Jesus, who makes it all possible. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
I know that you're my hero, and everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. It might have appeared to go unnoticed, but I've got it all here in my heart. I want you to know I know the truth. Yes, I know it. I would be nothing without you. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. Yes, you are the wind beneath my wings.
Well, knowing Annie and her family, I think the picture of her on the Segway is a fitting last picture. Cheryl, thank you for that song, and it's a beautiful song, isn't it? I was talking to Kai, and Kai wanted us to know that the line that she feels expresses how her feelings towards her mom so perfectly is the line, "Did you ever know that you're my hero?" Right? Because she was a hero to so many, especially her family. So we'd like to share a little more of Annie's story, maybe parts that you don't know about. Kai wrote down her mom's story, and she asked me to share it with you this afternoon. Annie Deering was born November 27, 1944 in Champaign, Illinois, and she was born to Delta Dittman. Her loving family included an adopted older brother, John, who tragically drowned at the age of 5. In her high school years, Anne's brilliant personality blossomed as she was named head of the cheerleading squad and dated the star of the football team, John Epler. After graduation, she traveled abroad to Turkey, to France, and Greece, before returning to the United States to study dance in New York City. Upon going back home to Illinois, she reunited with John Epler, and in 1965 the couple married and enlisted in the Peace Corps. This humanitarian mission was not only one of altruism, but proved to be a blessing of the highest magnitude, as Anne conceived her only daughter Kai, named after Chief Photo Kai, while in Sierra Leone, West Africa. As an early child development and nutrition expert, she insisted on having Kai stateside and flew back to Illinois while 8 months pregnant. Though Anne loved working with and helping the many people of the Mende tribe of Sierra Leone, she was ready to embrace her next chapter of life and motherhood. When Kai was born, the new family moved west to Corvallis, Oregon, where John accepted a football scholarship. After moving to Southeast Portland, the fairy tale relationship sadly ended, and Anne poured herself into raising the light of her life, Kai. Being a consummate survivor, Anne took numerous jobs to support herself and her daughter, including a stint as the first female UPS driver in Oregon. During this time, she also met a law student named John Deering. They married a few years later, and Anne opened her heart to John's 3 girls from a previous marriage, and the blended family moved into their dream home in Lake Oswego, where they spent many blissful years. As fate would have it, this marriage ultimately dissolved, but the bond with those children remained intact to this day. In 1991, Anne had to deal with the unfortunate passing of her mother, Delta Dittman. She leaned on her faith and the strong bond with her daughter Kai to persevere through this traumatic time. Emerging like a phoenix from the ashes, Anne went on to graduate from Concordia College in 1992, on the same day that Kai graduated from the University of Oregon, making them the first 2 college graduates in their family on the same day. Empowered by her degree, Anne went on to manage the Melting Pot and Ernesto's restaurant, and was beloved by her employees. This love of people was the basis of who Anne was as a person, and held true to her last days on earth as a barista at Starbucks. She also brought this passion for people to her women's prison ministry work at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, and her involvement in the prayer ministry, women's ministry, and fellowship here at Beaverton Christian Church. Anne had a way with people that touched their souls, leading to close ties to her family and to her friends. She brought love, no holds barred advice, and the Spirit of the Lord to everyone she knew. Anne is survived by her daughter, Kai Deering, her 3 stepdaughters, Lori Moore, Debbie Larson, and Sue Deering, step-granddaughters, Healy Bates, Corey Moore, Cassie Ortloff, Alex Fisher, and Tiffany Roden. She will forever be missed.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made. And God of your promise, you Don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature in silence follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so now. If the stars were made to worship so alive, if the mountains bow in reverence so alive, if the oceans roar your greatness so alive, for everything exists to lift you high, so alive. If the wind goes where you send it, so alive. If the rocks cry out in silence, so alive. If the sum of all our praises still fall shy, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you gladly chose surrender so alive, I can see your heart a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love, then so alive. Like you would again 100 billion times. What measure could amount to your desire? The one who never leaves the one behind. You're the one who never leaves the one behind. You're the one who never leaves the one behind. Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from, oh, is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life, oh, is my song. Yes, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, oh. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sail. are good. Oh, and let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Yes, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, yes, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, so good. Oh,
Good afternoon. My name's Chuck Goen. I know a few faces out there. It's been a while since I've been back. And anyway, I'm pleased to be here today to be able to share a few thoughts about my special friend, Annie. Annie and I go pretty far back, and some of you would not believe this, but I first met Annie, I think it was 1975. And I know some of you are thinking, well, Chuck, you don't look that old, but it was about 1975, and I was actually a young sailor, quite the young sailor, that was stationed in Swan Island. I know Swan Island's still around here, stationed there, and you may think, well, how did you meet Annie at Swan Island? And don't get me wrong, she wasn't hanging around the boat docks or anything like that. It's just that at that time, Annie and her husband, John, and my brother and his wife, Frances, they were all good friends, and I was stationed out here. And somehow we ended up at a brunch at the Jansen Beach Red Lion. Again, I don't know if that's still around here. Ended up at a brunch, and being a 19-year-old sailor, I was probably more interested in eyeing the waitresses than I was about getting to know this lady that was sitting at my table. You know, she was chatting away. She was very interesting. But again, I really didn't know her at all, and I didn't know what type of impact she would have on my life over the next, I hate to say, 40 years. And I began to think about when I was asked to speak, I really had a hard time kind of figuring out what our relationship really was like. I was really struggling with what to put down on paper. And then I happened upon a little book that Annie gave me, and it's like she placed it right in front of me in the basement. I had no reason to find this book, and it was called Annie Ant Don't Cry. Annie Ant Don't Cry. And it was basically a little children's book about an ant named Annie and another ant named Arnie. And for some reason, Annie just thought I might want this book. And I will spare you the details. It was basically about one aunt helping and encouraging another more needy aunt to somehow skateboard down a hill. But anyway, that's not important. What's important is what she wrote in the inscription. And this is what she wrote in the inscription. It said, "After reading this book, I realized that we are Annie Aunt and Arnie Aunt, often trading positions of needy and encourager, and always grateful for our enduring friendship of love and support. Thank you for being my lifelong friend." And I read that. I said, wow, that really describes our relationship, combination of needy and encourager. Anyway, so there was like a 6-year gap between my time in the service and really crossing paths again. And it was in 1981 where my first wife, Dana, we got married in St. Louis, and we ended up moving out this way. And it so happened that my wife, Dana, went to work for her in the same accounting firm as Annie, and they got to be very good friends. Now, during that period for Annie, she was definitely probably more the needy aunt because she was going through pretty much a rough divorce at that particular time. And so we decided, just start having her over for dinner over at our house in Beaverton, right down the street there. And to be honest, though, I didn't know if we invited Annie to dinner at first or she invited herself, because as you know, Annie, she wasn't somebody, she didn't know a stranger, and she was not, she was okay about kind of, I wouldn't say invading somebody's space, but she was definitely not shy about getting into your space. I mean, some would call it, at a minimum, a little pushy, borderline invasive, but she was, very comfortable with getting inside your space. But really, though, all kidding aside, if you were someone who looked past that perceived pushiness and got to know Annie on a one-on-one basis, you were just so thrilled and excited that she was part of your life because she added so much to it. And anyway, so Annie became a regular fixture at our house for many meals, and we didn't mind it because she was very, very helpful, very, very helpful person. And Annie, she had a way of kind of taking charge of things, and which could be either helpful or a little bit annoying, but definitely always entertaining. That's what I liked about it. But anyway, she would come in and she would, we were having trouble getting a dinner together. She would throw together some last-minute dinner ideas or bring us a bunch of food from Ernesto's, whatever. If the kids were struggling with their homework or some sort of a weird assignment that they get, she would just jump right in and get it done. And she was very good at throwing together, last-minute birthday parties, for the rowdy suburban kids over here in Beaverton. But it was good. She definitely had a way of organizing kids, keeping things moving, and definitely never getting dull. But anyway, those were good years for us. But I think where our friendship really began to blossom really was probably the last 15 years or so. In 2001, we sold our house in Beaverton, and my wife and I, we went off to seminary in Johnson City, Tennessee. And it was a hard, departure. I mean, it was hard to leave a church. We've been here 20 years, made a lot of good friends, and it was really hard to leave, and difficult to leave Annie. And I remember just giving her a big hug in the parking lot of Ernesto's and wondering if we'd ever see her again. But as many as you know, in 2001, about a month after leaving for seminary, my first wife, Dana, suddenly passed away. And I found myself, as a single parent, not trying to adjust to single parenthood and also trying to adjust to seminary life. But Annie, at that point, I was really kind of the needy aunt, so to speak. And Annie had a way at that point of just kind of jumping in and filling the mother gap that was gone there, really, that was there because of my first wife's death. And so she was there a lot, definitely a lot, and she helped me navigate some really rough times and rough situations, helped me raise my children, and she was definitely my lifeline. And then in 2004, I was remarried to my current wife, Debbie. got married to my current wife, Debbie, and Annie came out for the wedding. She came out for the kids' graduations, and she was just really, again, still trying to remain part of our lives, which she did, but it really began to shift into a long-distance relationship, kind of a telephone relationship. We were always constantly on the phone, talking about everything, again, changing, going back and forth between a needy and encourager, talking about work, talking about church, talking about all these different things. And so it was really kind of like I said, the last probably 10 years or so was mostly a friendship that was phone-based. And when she finally got the nerve to get on Facebook or try some text messaging or something like that. We would send text messages to each other. In fact, the last message I got from her was a text message, a Sunday that she received her stroke. And it was, it was definitely tough. But I regrettably, even though we talked so much on the phone that I think I took it for granted, and I have to admit this, and I apologize to Annie if she was here, that there were times that I'd see the phone message and I'd see Ann Deering, and I wouldn't answer it, because I was too busy or too preoccupied, or, I knew that if I answered the phone, Annie would be in a cheery mood, and I wasn't always in the mood to be cheery, as some of you know, and so it was very tough, but I regret that. I just would give anything to be able to just hear her voice again, be able to hear those encouraging words, and again, just to talk with her, just to tell her that I love her, how much I miss her, and that I'm never going to forget her. And fortunately for Annie, she wouldn't make it easy for us to forget her. Annie was somebody who, as you know, she was always giving gifts. She'd give the little book. She was just a very generous person, always finding opportunities to give gifts. Some gifts were better than others, but she always gave gifts. And I remember when we moved away, for some reason she made sure I wouldn't forget Portland. So she would always send in Portland prints and Portland books and all this kind of stuff. But the best thing that she sent, she got, once in a while she would send food. The best thing she ever sent for me was about 4 3-pound containers of Johnny's seasoning. Now, anybody know Johnny's? I didn't know. Have you heard of Johnny's? Johnny's, I guess, I thought it was made in Oregon, but I think it's actually a Washington product. It's just the seasoning salts. It's made up of this great mixture of seasons that taste excellent on anything. I mean, it's probably not good for my heart, but I put it on everything. I put it on vegetables. I put it on potatoes. I put it on corn on the cobs, and I put it on popcorn. And again, Johnny's had something that just makes everything taste better. Now, this is not an advertisement for Johnny's or anything like that. But when I thought about it, I thought about Annie. You know what? I realized every time when I went and took that container out of the cabinet, again, I've got probably like a 10-year supply of Johnny's. I took it out and I thought of Annie. And you know why I thought of Annie? Because Annie was like Johnny's. She had this nice, wonderful mixture of personality, and gifts, and talents, and just love for the Lord that made every single life that she touched taste better. Every one of you, your life was enhanced by allowing Annie to be in your life. And I'm definitely grateful for that. She definitely made my life and the life of my family better. Annie's gone. I'm sure going to miss her, love her so much. But no, I'm just thank God for the many years that I was able to have her in my life. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming today and supporting our family in this really hard time. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Debbie Larson and I'm Ann's stepdaughter. She never ever introduced me as her stepdaughter. She always said, "This is my daughter Debbie." She always included me in so many things. And I think I was probably 7 when she first met my dad. But when I was 14, I showed up on their front porch and I said, "I'm moving in." She taught me how to hug people. She also taught me that it was okay to say, "I love you." She made me who I am today. She used to say to me, "As a parent, you earn the right to be a parent. Your children didn't choose to be your children. You chose to have them come into your life." I'll never forget that. My kids are so important to me because of that. She would say that she was so grateful to have me in her life, but in reality, it was me who was so grateful to have her. She made us hug. She said we couldn't leave or go to bed without at least 8 hugs a day. So we were always hugging. I never hugged. That was such a weird thing for me, but it was amazing. For birthdays and Christmases, I would say, what do you want? What do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday? And she would say, I want to spend time with you and your family. So she was always game for whatever we came up with. So she would do wine tastings with us. She would do paint night with us, as you saw in the pictures. She loved our Sunday night dinners over at my sister's house. She loved my sister's choir concerts, loved listening to her voice. She even endured going to birthday parties with my biological mom. She never complained about it at all. She just always came. She would take my daughter to the craft store and do crafts. She loved that with Cassie. She loved talking with Alex, and she would call me and say, I love talking to Alex. She's so great, and I love giving her hugs because she hates them so much. She was so excited about doing a reading at my niece's blessing of her marriage. And it turned out that she ended up getting to read her favorite verse, which was amazing, and she did a great job. We were able to spend the entire day with her that day. That was the day before she had her stroke, so we were extremely lucky. She called me the next day to tell me what a wonderful time she had at that reception, and that she was so happy that she got to do the reading and that she got to spend time with us. And then about 20 minutes after she called me, the phone rang again, and I thought, why is she calling me again? I almost let it go to my voicemail because I thought it was her butt dialing me, because I knew she was here at the church doing her small groups thing. And thank God I answered the phone, because it was somebody from the church telling me that she had had a stroke, and I was able to get to the hospital in time to hold her hand and to be there. Anne left this earth way too soon. I took her for granted. I would call and talk to her on my way home from work, and I miss that. I don't get that opportunity to call her anymore and talk to her. I just expected that she would be around for a lot more of my needs. How terrible for my needs, but she did. She was there for a lot, and she took care of me a lot. And I'm so grateful that I got all the time spent with her the day before, and I'm glad I got all those years with her. She loved all of us so much, and she didn't want to be a burden on any of us. So she left this earth the way she wanted to. She's now with God and at peace. And I'm so pleased that she found God, that she is at peace. It's what she would have wanted. It's how she would want it. So now it's time for me to say goodbye to her. I love you, Anne. Thank you for being my mom and the best grandma to my kids. You will be missed forever.
Good afternoon. I'm Adrienne Oakes, and I had the pleasure and privilege of serving with Annie on the Volunteer Aglow Women's Ministry team at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon. I'd like to share with you 3 simple words. 3 words that for us describe Annie as it related to her prison ministry experience: loving, giving, and faithful. Annie was a strong believer in Jesus Christ. She knew, as referenced in John 3:16, that God so loved the whole world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him would not perish but have everlasting life. And she was a devoted follower of Christ. How do we know? Well, God's word tells us that we will know they are followers by their love one to another. Let me share with you how Annie loved. Annie wanted nothing more than to share God's love with all people. The whosoever in John 3:16. Whosoever believes in him will have eternal life. She brought that message of love to the women in prison in the most loving way. The inmates, upon hearing of her passing, said, "Oh no, she was our favorite." And we knew why. They shared with us how Annie's loving pet names she had for them were so appreciated, and they've been deeply missed. She pulled people into her love with her sweet names: Baby Cakes, Sweetheart, Sweetie Girl, Beautiful, Gorgeous. The list seemed endless. You see, many of the incarcerated women, they mentioned how rare it was to be called such tender, sweet names on a regular basis. In their harsh realities, Annie's pet names were healing. She was so loving to the whosoever. She was loving to all. Annie was also giving. Annie gave of her time and her talent to the inmates at Coffee Creek in so many ways. One way was as a mentor to Jennifer, who was released almost a year ago and is doing very well, thanks in part to Annie. Jennifer shared how Annie tirelessly poured into her life, saying, "You know, Annie came and visited me every Monday for a year and a half. She supported me in everything that I did. She really was just an amazing soul, and I loved her so very much. I'm very sad that she's gone." And Jennifer continued, "Just please let the family know that she really did a lot of good things in that place." Later that week, Jennifer shared even more with me about the impact of Aunt's giving. "Annie means so much to me, and there is way more that I could say, like how she taught me that I am beautiful and that I can love myself. Her love was so pure that I'm not sure I will ever see that again." No one gave like Annie. Annie was loving, Annie was giving, and lastly, Annie was faithful. Annie brought the love of God to the women in Coffee Creek Prison faithfully for just over 7 years. And she wasn't simply just involved in the services on Monday nights. She was a regular customer at the hair design school in the facility. She was a fixture at all programs, the graduations, celebrations, choir concerts. And you heard about how she was a devoted mentor. We estimated that she entered the prison over 500 times to visit women and share the love of Christ faithfully. Loving, giving, faithful. That was our Annie. Reminds me of Jesus, who loved so much that he gave his son so that whosoever believed in him would have eternal life and live faithfully with him forever. We know we'll see you again in heaven, Annie. And in the meantime, we will love, give, and be faithful, just like you were.
Missy? Okay, I'd like my slideshow too. I first want to just thank BCC. They've been amazing. Appreciate all of the last minute things that you allowed me to do to make this work. So I also wanted to say that, you know, I was Annie's daughter, and most of you probably didn't know me as Kai. You probably knew me as Kai Ann, because that's how she always referred to me. And as much as I didn't like it, I always was Kai Ann. So if you hear me by Kai, it's probably because it's Kai Ann. I'm going to lighten the mood here a little bit. We're going to have a little bit of fun today, because she was a total prankster and a total nut and a lot of fun. And they told me I had 3 to 5 minutes, but if you know me, I have a tendency to talk, and I speak for a living. And so I want a little bit of permission in case I go a little bit long. So I also want a little bit of permission in case I lose it. I'm the one who would cry at Love Boat because Isaac never got the girl. So I have a little bit of problems with some of these. But she was many things to many people at all different areas of her life, as you can tell. And I know many of you here today, I haven't had a chance to meet you because she impacted so many people. So I really implore you to come to the celebration of life at 3:30. My friends have worked very hard on it. It's only 20 minutes away in Wilsonville. And come see me and tell me your stories. I want to know your stories. I want to get to know, how much you meant to her. I know it's a tough time. It's a tough time for me, and I know it's a tough time for all of you. And so I want to thank you for coming and being here today. Okay. She meant many things to me, and I'm going to go to the next slide. What she meant to me at the end of her life was she was absolutely my mom, of course, but she was my very best friend, and my playmate, actually. But that wasn't always the case. So many of you came here and you know me from high school. So it wasn't always the case we were best buddies. In fact, she called those the lost years. So we didn't get along necessarily back then. But I'm going to take you back to when I actually was in grade school, because she was by far the best mom ever. I couldn't wait to get to school. I know Jennifer Cena, when I would walk to Palisades, I couldn't wait to get to school to rip open my lunch spot or my little lunch paper bag, because in there she always wrote notes on my napkins that would say, hey, good luck on your test today, or encouraging words, or she would carve a heart in my apple or a smiley face or something. It was awesome. And then we would race home after school, and I know Jennifer Cena had a long walk home up that hill that overlooks, so she would often come and have after school snacks, and she always had that there, and she was always amazing with homework. And I know we had a lot of shopping sprees back to school. We would do fashion shows afterwards, and I know that tradition carries on with my poor husband, Mark. I go shopping and I do a little fashion show for him too. If you go to the next slide, that's her in my grade school years. Next slide, this is, she ended up coaching our soccer teams. She had no business coaching soccer. She knew nothing about it, but she bought a book, and she figured it out. She had threw amazing parties for us, if anyone remembers the sleepovers. But she was kind of a rule breaker, which I guess now you guys know where I get it. From one of my other favorite times was, she's insane. This is what I mean by she was a rule breaker and a little bit crazy. It was 11 o'clock at night on a school night. I'm in grade school, and she comes in and wakes me up and says, I'm bored. Let's go bowling. And I'm like, okay. I said, it's a school night. She said, it's okay, I'll write you a note. You can get out of school early and sleep in. So we went bowling. Next slide. I got called to the principal's office at Palisades Grade School, which wasn't unusual, just so you know. But they said, your mom's here. And I thought, oh great, what do I do now? And I walked outside, and this car was sitting outside, this metallic Volkswagen convertible, and she loved her convertibles, as you know. And she said, we're gonna play hooky today and just go drive around. Okay, fantastic. We played hooky and drove all around, had a great time. She was really uninhibited. I guess you get that by now. She wasn't very self-conscious, and she was honestly kind of crazy, and she just did or said whatever she felt. And I'm gonna be completely transparent. As a kid growing up, I was mortified. I was constantly embarrassed. Next slide. I'm not sure whose baby this is, but that makes perfect sense. Because my mother was notorious when we would go to a restaurant, there'd be a young couple that would be eating a meal, and there would be this crying baby, and my mom would go over and grab the baby, say, can I take the baby, and then you guys can enjoy your meal? And I would say, Mom, I can't believe you just took that baby from that table. And she would say, well, now you know where I got you. So she was just like that. I remember I had my first boy-girl party. I was really excited. We were in the basement, and I looked over my shoulder, and there's this big picture window, and there's all my sisters and my mom with branches on their heads smiling. She was completely insane. If you remember the last scene in Grease, where Sandra Dee was wearing the spandex and the candies, she went to my grade school like that and taught disco. She also was notorious, I don't know where it was hidden, but we would drive around with her in the convertible Porsche and she would reach between her legs and grab a wig, a blonde wig, and stick it on her head and proceed to drive all around town with this crazy thing and even go to Debbie's boyfriend's house that worked at, or Baskin Robbins, which was work like that. And we were dying, we were on the floorboard in the back seat. So incredibly embarrassed. She taught the 6th grade boys ballet, and actually we had a talent show and she choreographed the whole thing, and at the end it involved them popping their balloons. And she's probably she made us wear matching Rat Pack sweaters when we skied and tortured us with Hooked on Phonics in the back of the van sliding around. Probably not legal today. She was hilarious. She's the only person I knew that traveled with her very own fart machine. She tortured Austin at your 9-year-old birthday party, and she brought it to my 32nd-year-old birthday party. My friends were like in the restroom, "Oh my gosh, is your mom okay?" And I knew exactly what was going on. I said, "She's fine." She was completely insane. In fact, one of my favorite ones, next slide, was, this is who she was. She came to school, in grade school, dressed as an old lady, I think with Ellie Gatto's mom. I'm not entirely sure at this point if that was her or not. She didn't admit to being the rabbit chaperone at my junior high school dance until I was in my 40s. And now I have proof, found that, so that's kind of good. She had to learn how to speak Annie. She had kind of her own language. She mixed words up, if you remember, a lot. I'm probably my mother's daughter. I did an Annieism today in the car, misreading something. And she had all of her acronyms. She loved them. And so she would call you, see somebody and say NBD, nice but different. We'd go to a restaurant and let's say the person was kind of rude. She'd say HVR. How very rude. So you just had to kind of roll with it and learn how to speak Annie. In high school, these were, especially later in high school, these were really dark days for us, and Chuck Cohn alluded to some of that. Divorces and repossession of cars and into early college, the state came and padlocked our house. It was dark days. But she always had room for other people, which I thought was insane. I mean, she was probably clinically depressed at this time, could barely get out of bed. And she allowed my friend Teresa Engelhard to come stay with us because her mom was abusive. She also, next slide, allowed Ty Harwood to come move in with us. We're born on the exact same day of the exact same year. And she would parade us around restaurants and tell us that these are her twins. And to this day, Ty's one of my very best friends. I was in his wedding. I thought I was going to wear a tuxedo, but apparently that didn't work out. Love you, Jamie. But she had a heart for loving everybody. And if you go to the next slide, she never, ever thought of these people right here as anything other than her biological family. And so I love that. Even in the dark years, even though divorce, she never, ever broke that bond with any of us. So I want to thank you all for being here and being a part of my life for so long. Really appreciate that. So then I told you she was my best friend. I told you I'd get there, how that happened, because we still aren't there yet. But I would say at about the age of 21, my mom had now moved into the trailer park that my grandmother had lived in for 20 years. That's where she lived to this day. So about 21, I came home and I was surly and mad and upset because, we went from everything to nothing. She was working at Burger King. I stayed in this guest room. It certainly wasn't my room. I never lived there. And I remember thinking, there's no tree, there's no lights, there's no presents. This sucks. And I went to bed early and mad at my mom. I'm not gonna lie. And I reached under my pillow to put my hands in there and I felt something and I pulled my pillow back. And there was a stocking, my stocking that she painstakingly made. And in there was a beautiful Christmas card. She was an incredible orator and writer. And in there was a round-trip plane ticket to New Orleans. I couldn't believe it. I said, what? She said, yep, get dressed. We're leaving in an hour. No idea. I said, I don't have any clothes for New Orleans. I just came from college. All I have is sweat. She said, open up the closet. I opened up the closet. there was a suitcase in there packed with all of these incredible clothes. And that began our incredible best friendship, if you will. And if you can go to the next slide. I was so appreciative, I actually let her put me in matching dresses. I knew that was tough. I liked that song, You Are My Hero, because I graduated a couple years later, because she really was my hero. You know, that kind of a fall from grace can make people bitter, angry, what have you. She never was. She was always just grateful and happy and excited. And so I was so proud of her. She worked at Burger King, put herself through school on the side, living in my grandma's trailer park, and she graduated, next slide, on the exact same day of the exact same year as I did. And we're the only two people on that side of the family that ever got a college degree. It was interesting because 19 years ago, I moved to Northern California, and you would have thought that the bond would have broken. Well, apparently, you know, she has a phone thing. So we talked on the phone every day as well. And we did amazing things. So I saw her 2 or 3 times a year, and it was so much fun. I had such an opportunity, if you saw those pictures, to really just spoil her rotten. So I think sometimes when this happens, people at the end say, man, I wish I would have spent more time with her. I wish I would have done more with her. I can honestly tell you, I don't have any regrets. Can you go to the next slide? We did everything. I mean, everything from, I'll just read some, Cancun. And we didn't just go to Cancun, we did it all. I took her last year to Universal Studios for her birthday to Orlando and made her run around Harry Potter World. She didn't even know who that was. I took her to Safari Land in Santa Rosa, Carmel, Monterey, Vegas a bunch. She loved her historic homes. I took her to Napa, Seattle. We did, every time in Northern California, we would just do everything from Champagne Bay cruises. We did tons of shows, including seeing my husband's original rock opera. She's always came to go see him perform loud, and she didn't care. It was awesome. But we were able to spoil her. We took her to so many Cirque du Soleil shows. She was always front row where the lizard would come and eat her popcorn. We took her to Teatro Zanzini's. I took her to some horse shows, the Cavalli shows, the 49ers. I really couldn't remember all the places, and I was able to take her to and spoil her rotten to. But I think my favorite thing was, next slide, that she was always game for anything. From zip lining, which I understood that she did a training for her prison ministry about zip lining and what that did for her. Of course, the segways, the pedal drinking dive bar event that we went on, to really, the roller coaster there, which I just think is hilarious. And she was still, as an adult, embarrassing me. So the button is sitting in her house right now, but I brought the button to hold up to show you. It says first time to Disneyland, and she wore that the entire time. Get something for free or something special. But next slide. She really did live life to the fullest, and we should all take a page out of her book. And you should all spend more time with your friends and families that mean the most to you, and so you have no regrets when this happens, and again, it happened way too young. But it's funny, people have said to me, I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom. And I don't agree with that. Well, first of all, she's right here. But second of all, what happens is a loss is when you don't know where something is. It's been misplaced. She knows exactly where she was going, and I know exactly where she is. So I didn't lose anything. But I hope to see you all at the memorial, whatever it is, celebration of life. Thank you so much.
Get a little involved in the service. So we're going to sing a couple worship songs. I think they're very well known, so please join in. broken, I run to you, for your arms are open wide. I am weary, but I know your touch restores my life. So I wait for you, and I wait for you. I'm falling on my knees, offering all of me. Jesus, you're all this heart is living for. I'm falling on my knees, offering all of me. Jesus, you're all this heart is living for. Hungry, I come to you, for I know you satisfy.
To hear the many ways in which Anne has impacted our lives, and I'd encourage you, if you can make it to the potluck this afternoon at 3:30, I'm sure the family would be encouraged to hear how Anne had impacted your life, so you're all welcome. You know, today is a day when we get to remember Anne and what she meant to us, but I think there's also just a time for realizing that there are a lot of different feelings, a lot of different people here with different ways that they process grief and loss. I think it's okay for us to just spend a little bit of time and remind ourselves that God has made us to be feeling people, right? We're human beings, and part of that is to feeling not just the joys of life, but also the times when things are not so joyful. And there's a story in the Bible that I think is appropriate for us just to just take a few minutes in. And I think it's important for us to recognize that Anne was a woman of faith, no doubt, and she loved the Lord. She loved the Bible. She lived the Bible, as we can tell by the way that she lived her life. And so I wanted to share this story, and it's a story that's found in the Gospel of John, in the 11th chapter. And it's a story about a funeral that took place. It had some deep feelings and some questions and ultimately some hope. The man that had passed away is a man by the name of Lazarus. And Lazarus came from a big family. He had two sisters that loved him dearly, Mary and Martha. And he had a lot of friends, and among those friends was a man by the name of Jesus from Nazareth. And the story tells us that Jesus arrived 4 days after Lazarus had passed away. And as Jesus is approaching the house is full of people who are mourning and they're crying and they're in despair. Both of Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, run out to Jesus to meet him, but separately. And when they see Jesus, they say, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." You know, I suspect that in an occasion like this, there are some of us that may be asking those if type of questions. You know, if I'd only had spent more time with Anne, if I'd only been nicer to Anne, or whatever it might have been. And those if kind of questions are normal. But I'd encourage you to resist the temptation to place blame on yourself. And yet if we aren't supposed to blame ourselves, then who are we supposed to blame for maybe the sorrow, the struggles that we feel? Maybe God is the one that we should blame. And that's precisely what Mary and Martha were implying when they sort of said to Jesus, "You know, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." It's almost as if you could see them wagging their finger at Jesus. Jesus, if you hadn't been here. You know, I've learned long ago that it's useless to either accuse God or try to defend God. But neither is it sinful to ask him questions. It's okay to ask questions of God. In the story, Jesus doesn't scold Mary or Martha for asking those questions and somehow implying that he's responsible for Lazarus' early demise. And we shouldn't feel guilty for wondering if maybe there was something that God couldn't have done to have maybe interceded in Anne's life and kept her from dying. But I think we have to recognize that it was just Anne's time. Still, that's hard for us to accept. And yet when we look at God's word, we realize, and we look in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, that there is a season for everything, isn't there? There's a time to be born and a time to die. And this just happened to be Anne's time. As we continue in the story, we find that Jesus is surrounded by family and friends of Lazarus, and Jesus is deeply moved. He asks where the body of Lazarus is. And when he views Lazarus, we can sort of anticipate that he's going to say something profound. And yet the author of John doesn't say what Jesus said. It records what he did. It said that Jesus wept. Here is Jesus of Nazareth, who is God's Son, the creator of the universe, the sustainer of the universe, attending the funeral of a friend and openly weeping, without embarrassment, without apology. In fact, those that were with him said, "Look how much he loves Lazarus." So I think if it's okay for Jesus to show grief and to cry, then it's okay for us as well. And I think that God wants us to be able to go through those types of feelings, because as we go through that type of process, we experience a healing and a wholeness that returns. It helps to restore the peace that was so disturbed by our loss. God understands our pain. He knows what it's like to hurt deeply. Because there was a day when God lost a family member, Jesus. So he wants us to work through that, to express our grief, however it is. But he doesn't want us to do it alone. He wants us to invite him into the deepest parts of our heart where he can minister to us. He wants to help us to work through everything that we're feeling. And we'll feel, maybe in the days and the weeks, and maybe in the months ahead. And our hope is that healing will come, and it will. Peace will return. But there's another kind of peace that God desires to give us. Yes, he wants us to experience the peace that comes from working through the sorrow or the grief that we may feel. But more importantly, he wants us to be at peace with him. You see, there was another reason why Jesus wept at the funeral of Lazarus. It was because of what ultimately was behind the sorrow and the grief of Mary and of Martha. The reason for death itself. It's our sin. See, the Bible tells us that all of us have sinned, all of us have fallen short, and rebelled against what God expected of us. And the result of that rebellion, the wages of our sin, is death. And not just a physical death, but an eternal death and separation from God himself. And this is ultimately what was behind the grieving of Jesus. See, God never intended us to die. We were created to have eternal fellowship with him. But our first parents, Adam and Eve, thought that they knew what's best, and they lived life on their own, and they were wrong. And the result was that their turning from God separated him from his holiness. But it wasn't just for Adam and Eve, it was for the rest of mankind, including you and I. But the good news is, and there is good news, is that God in his great mercy did what we couldn't do for ourselves. He provided us the opportunity for our relationship with him to be restored by offering himself through his son Jesus as the only acceptable sacrifice for our sins and our rebellion. Your death is certain, we will all face it someday. Anne has gone before us, and though it came earlier and more unexpectedly, we can learn from her passing. Annie fell ill. It was on a Sunday afternoon, right up here at one of her Bible classes, and And I wasn't able to get to see her until later that evening, and by the time that I got to the hospital, she was unconscious and the prognosis was not grim. It was grim. The next day, BJ and I were summoned by the family to come to the hospital at 2:45. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen at 2:45, but we were glad to be there. And as we walked in the room, the family was there, and Kai came up to me, and she thanked us for being there. She just said, you know, we want you to tell our mother that it's okay to let go. And I was really grateful just for two things. One, that I was invited to be a part of that, but I was also grateful and appreciative for the family to be able to have gotten to that decision, because that's a difficult place to get to. So we all just sort of gathered around Anne's bedside for a few moments, and BJ read some scriptures, and we just spoke words of affirmation into Annie, knowing that she could hear us. And then we just prayed, and I just prayed Annie. I said, the Bible tells us that Jesus has gone ahead to prepare a place for us. And I said, your place is ready, and Jesus is waiting for you, and it's okay to go home. So we finished our prayer, and we were about to leave, and the doctor, apparently alerted by something outside on the monitors or something, came in and went to Annie's bedside, and in a few moments pronounced that she had passed away. And again, I thought to myself, what a sacred moment. What a sacred moment. Especially when a Christian, someone who loves Jesus, crosses that line into eternity. But I also thought, Annie, in her unwavering faith, was demonstrating for us how much she truly trusted Jesus. With her very last breath, by faith, she let go.